It started with a silence. Clara, my girlfriend, vanished several months ago. I had searched every corner of the city, plastered missing posters with her radiant smile on every lamppost, pleaded with the local authorities for any lead, any crumb of information. Nothing. It was as if she'd evaporated into thin air. The days turned into weeks, weeks into months, each a fresh wave of despair crashing over me. Then, 3 days ago, a flicker of hope. Daniel, Clara's younger brother, a resourceful and tech-savvy young man, contacted me. "Ethan," he said, his voice tight with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Clara's phone." It pinged. Briefly. About 2 minutes. Then the signal vanished. I managed to trace the location to a place called Raven's Hollow. Raven's Hollow? I practically shouted into the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. "We have to go, Daniel. Now." "It's not that simple, Ethan." Daniel's tone sobered. "I did some digging. Raven's Hollow is, well, it's notorious. They're essentially a closed community, a self-sufficient village focused on breeding and selling meat dogs. They don't take kindly to outsiders poking around, unless you're there to buy. So, we'll pretend to buy dogs." I countered, my mind already racing. "No, that won't work." Daniel was firm. "Even if we pretended to be buyers, we'd only get half a day, tops. If Clara is there, finding her, getting her out, it'll take days. We need a plan." "What else can we do? We can't just stand here and hope for a miracle," I asked, exasperated. There was a pause on the line. "I have an idea, a risky one. You pretend to be simple-minded." I frowned. "A simpleton? You think that'll actually work?" "It's the only way we get you into the village undetected. I'll pose as your caretaker, your brother, and then I'll say you got lost while buying dogs. I'll find a place to stay near Raven's Hollow. If you find anything at all, you contact me immediately." But how does one even act like a simpleton? I wondered out loud. "Oh, it's easy. Babble incoherently at any questions, and don't act like you're playing dumb. Do you know what I mean? And most importantly, don't act too dumb so as to not arouse suspicion." Daniel didn't give me time to dwell on the complexities of acting foolish. He just continued solidifying the plan, his voice tight with a familiar anxiety I had come to recognize in the many months of us searching for Clara. "I'll tell them I'm there to buy a dog. While I'm talking with them, you go on a walk. I act like you wandered away. Use this opportunity to blend in with the village." The plan, while absurd, had a certain logic. But the idea of playing the fool, it felt demeaning, impossible. But then, Clara's face flashed in my mind, the memory of her laugh, the touch of her hand. For her, I could do anything. "All right," I agreed. "Good. We'll leave for Raven's Hollow tomorrow morning. But listen to me very carefully, Ethan. Hide your phone somewhere very safe. If you find Clara, call me immediately." The next morning dawned gray and ominous, mirroring the dread churning in my stomach. Daniel, ever the resourceful one, had managed to borrow a dilapidated dog transport van, the inside reeking of stale urine and something indefinably worse. He even found some clothes for me that looked like they had seen better decades, torn and stained. He insisted I smear a bit of petroleum jelly around my nose to simulate a perpetual runny nose, saying it would sell the act. I must have looked like a wreck. "Okay, Ethan, listen up. When we get to the village, I'm going to say you're my younger brother, that you got a fever as a kid and it affected you. Don't blow this." I gave him a thumbs up, trying to suppress the rising feeling of ridiculousness. "Don't worry. Fooling people? It's practically a superpower." The van rattled and swayed its way towards Raven's Hollow. As we approached the village entrance, a group of men in black uniforms, resembling security guards, blocked our path. One of them, his face hard and suspicious, waved us down. "Where do you think you're going?" he barked, peering into the van, his eyes flicking between Daniel and me with distrust. I grinned stupidly, reaching out a grimy hand to poke the guard. He flinched back, disgusted. "What's your problem?" he snapped. Daniel jumped in, his voice apologetic. "Sorry, officer. This is my brother, Edgar. He had a fever when he was a kid, fried his brains a little. No harm intended. He produced a pack of cigarettes and offered it to the guard, whose face immediately softened. We heard your village had the best meat dogs around, so we came to have a look. The guard's expression hardened again. Who told you that? We don't sell meat dogs here. The air crackled with tension. From within the village, a chorus of dog barks echoed, a cacophony of sounds suggesting a vast number of animals. Before Daniel could respond, a black BMW X5 cruised past us, the guard barely glancing at it before waving it through. Once it was gone, he turned back to Daniel, his eyes narrowed. All right, that's enough. Don't believe everything you read on the internet. We don't sell meat dogs here. Be on your way. Daniel looked bewildered, while I stared intently at the BMW. The license plate was from out of state, and as I watched, 2 more luxury vehicles passed by, each with out-of-state plates, each granted immediate access. You got a lot of fancy cars coming through, huh? Daniel remarked, trying to sound casual. The guard simply repeated his earlier command. All right, move along. If you want to buy dogs, go somewhere else. Defeated, Daniel turned the van around, and we retreated. My chance to slip away, to search for Clara, had vanished. The guard had kept his gaze locked on me, vigilant, suspicious. We pulled over in a small town a few miles from Raven's Hollow, the air thick with frustration. Why had our plan failed? Why were we barred from entering? Did you see those cars? All luxury models, and the guard didn't even bat an eye. I pointed out. Yeah, and none of them had local plates, Daniel said, equally as confused as me. Something's definitely going on in that village, Daniel said, his brow furrowed. He pulled out his phone and started searching online. The internet says Raven's Hollow is the place to go for meat dogs. Why would the guards say they don't sell any? Let me see that. I took the phone and scanned the webpage, a forum post detailing the supposed bounty of meat dogs in Raven's Hollow. Raven's Hollow, meat dogs for sale, large and small available, tender meat, well-trained. I stopped, frowning. Trained? Why would meat dogs need training? Training? What kind of training? What would you even train a meat dog to do? Daniel's confusion mirrored my own. Look at this. Well-trained. It doesn't make sense. Unless, I looked at Daniel, my mind racing. Unless they're not selling meat dogs. Not meat dogs? Then what are they selling? People? Daniel shuddered. The idea sent a chill down my spine. Selling people? Could a village be so bold, so depraved? Even though our initial plan to buy the dogs failed, we didn't give up. Looking at all the comments talking about meat quality and home delivery, this could not possibly be the sale of normal meat dogs. I decided to enter the village in a luxury car to investigate. Daniel was ruled out of the plan, and I figured if I dressed nicely and looked nice, there was no way the guard would remember the ruffian from before. With my friend's help, I borrowed a Maybach and prepared to explore the secrets of the village. Daniel got me a suit for the occasion and remarked on how nice I looked. When Daniel mentioned Clara, I sadly promised him to find her, one way or another. My friend pulled up with the Maybach, and after a few words of thanks, I turned to go to Raven's Hollow. On the way there, the amount of luxury cars caught my eye. They all had out-of-state plates, and they were all headed towards the village. As I pulled up to the security post, I put on my sunglasses just in case the security guard recognized me. But once he realized I was in a Maybach, his face immediately changed. His guard straightened his posture and happily greeted me. I remained in my sunglasses and rudely asked, "Well, what else would I be doing here?" The security guard awkwardly rubbed his hands and asked where I had come from and how I had heard about Raven's Hollow. I made up the name of a local businessman on the spot, Wang Chong. Hearing this, the security guard immediately jumped and said that I was allowed to enter and that I had to check in at the village chief's office. I quickly drove through, secretly relieved that I hadn't gotten caught. As I entered, I realized that the roads were recently renovated to fit the luxury cars. A sign reading, "Raven's Hollow welcomes you," stood tall above the entrance. As I drove through, the barks of dogs echoed from the houses on each side. Although the houses were old, they were well maintained, and the entire village looked like it had been renovated recently. I soon passed a sign pointing me towards the village chief's office. Once I parked, I was greeted by a man leading me to the chief's office. The chief's office looked expensive, but the design felt out of place. The chief stood up as I entered and asked my name. Chin, I answered. Oh, Mr. Chin, welcome. I heard you were a friend of Mr. Wong. Have you picked out any dogs yet? I stumbled on his question, but quickly recovered. What kind of dogs do you have? I want to see them first. Didn't Mr. Wong tell you? He asked. I replied, of course, but I want to choose for myself. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The chief looked at me for a while, then nodded and agreed to bring me to see the dogs. The chief brought me outside and had me sit on the back of his scooter. He started the engine and told me that we were going to Dog King's house to check out the fiercest and smartest meat dogs available. He also added that those dogs would be a lot more expensive. I asked for an estimate, and the chief told me that they were around $100,000. Hearing this, I was shocked. $100,000 for a dog? What was going on? We soon arrived at a house, and the chief knocked on the door. A bald man came to greet us and led us into the yard, where rows of dogs in cages barked viciously at us. There were all kinds of dogs: golden retrievers, huskies, beagles, and even some mutts. Was this all a mistake? Was this just a normal dog selling place? The bald man said, Mr. Chin, these are the best meat dogs available. Although this sounded like I expected, I didn't let my guard down. These men wouldn't spend $100,000 on dogs to eat. To avoid detection, I nonchalantly walked up to the dog cages and looked at a husky in one of the cages. This husky looks nice, I said. The bald man praised my eye for quality and said that this was the smartest husky that he had. I didn't show my confusion and asked how much it was. He responded by saying that if I bought a meat dog, I could have this dog for free, as it was only for home security. The husky started barking, and the bald man kicked its cage, causing the husky to whimper in sadness. I already have a lot of dogs back home, I lied, pretending to be uninterested. But the bald man quickly followed up with, well, how about we go and check out the meat dogs instead? It was clear at this point that the meat dogs weren't actual dogs. Luckily, I didn't give myself away. The chief agreed and said that the bald man had the best meat dogs in the village. I pretended to ponder about the option and agreed, saying that I was able to return them if I didn't like them. The chief and the bald man responded immediately by nodding their heads and guaranteeing a full refund if I didn't like the dogs. All right, follow me, Mr. Chin. I followed the bald man, my heart pounding in my chest. He led me into the house and down a narrow hallway where several small rooms branched off. The air grew thick with a cloying, unpleasant odor. He stopped in front of one of the rooms, a barely furnished cell. Inside, a woman with matted hair and vacant eyes sat on a cot, her hands bound behind her back. The bald man's voice took on a leering tone. This one's Mocha, a husky, one of my best pieces. I recoiled inwardly. They referred to these women as dogs. The sight of the woman, her face gaunt and bruised, sent a jolt of shock through me. My scalp prickled, and my hands began to tremble uncontrollably. She was naked, lying on the bed. As the woman slowly raised her head, I noticed that she was completely desensitized, as if she was expecting to be tortured again. She stared directly at me, and I knew instantly who she was. Clara. A wave of nausea washed over me. My head swam, and my body began to shake uncontrollably. So, this was what they meant by meat dogs. These women, and if the entire village was involved in this, there had to be many more women like Clara. They were kidnapping them, holding them captive, and selling them to depraved individuals. This village was a hub of illegal human trafficking. I clenched my fists, biting down hard on my teeth. I could hear the grinding sound they made. The old village chief seemed to notice my distress. He turned to me, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. Everything all right, Mr. Chin? You don't look too well. I forced myself to compose myself, burying my rage deep inside. She's acceptable. 100,000. The village chief chuckled. Yes, sir. This one's been trained well. Very obedient. How did you hear about us, Mr. Chin? Was it Mr. Wong? Yeah, he said you had interesting products. The village chief leaned in conspiratorially. Truth be told, Mr. Chin, This is one of the prettiest we've had. I'll take her. I made my decision, determined to get Clara out of this hellhole, no matter the cost. All right, take this dog away with you. I had a little over 10 grand, and I immediately transferred the money to Baldy, who was completely ecstatic. But in that moment, I was already planning how to free Clara from this prison. Suddenly, the old village chief's phone rang. He answered, muttered a few affirmations, and then hung up. He turned to me, his eyes now hard and cold. Mr. Cheen, you said you were introduced by Mr. Wong, right? That's right. I knew that phone call was about me, and I prepared for a confrontation. Sure enough, the old village chief's demeanor shifted completely. Gone was the obsequious smile. Now, he glared at me, his voice dripping with menace. I just had someone call Mr. Wong. He doesn't know anyone by your name. Who are you? A reporter? Police? I was exposed. Sensing the danger, I saw the village chief give the bald man a subtle nod. The bald man began to inch towards me. Without hesitation, I bolted for the door. The bald man and the village chief reacted quickly, giving chase. I burst out of the house and jumped onto the village chief's scooter, the keys still in the ignition. I kicked the engine to life and sped away, leaving them in the dust. Stop him, the village chief yelled. The scooter was slow, but it was enough to put some distance between us. As the scenery blurred, I tried to figure out my next move. I couldn't go back to the village headquarters. They'd be waiting for me. I couldn't leave through the main entrance either. What could I do? I needed to find a safe place to contact Daniel, to call for backup. I pulled the scooter over to the side of the road and hopped off, scrambling down the embankment towards a small stream. As I reached for my phone, I realized it wasn't working. The signal was gone. What was going on? I stared at the phone in disbelief. It had had a full signal just moments ago. Did the village have a signal jammer? Were they preventing me from alerting the outside world? I was trapped, completely cut off. It was up to me. As I trudged through the stream, I suddenly heard the sound of barking in the distance. Men must be coming with the dogs to hunt me down. I started to panic, thinking about dumping my scent in the river. But suddenly, a new idea sprung to mind. What if I doubled back to the bald man's house to rescue Clara? I tried to throw as much water on myself as I could to hide my scent and started to head back. The village was very small, and although I could constantly hear the barking of dogs, no one had discovered me yet. I reached the front gate of the house, but it was locked. Finding a nearby rock, I climbed over the wall and sneaked into the house. The same dogs were in their cages, barking at my presence, but I ignored them and headed towards the little cell. The door was locked, but the lock was quickly smashed with a rock. As I entered, I saw Clara sitting on the bed. Her hair was messy, and her body was covered in bruises. Upon hearing the sound of me entering, she slowly lifted her head. I was so choked up that I couldn't even say anything, but she remained silent. I mustered the strength to tell her, "Clara, it's me." Only then did she focus on me, and she let out a low, guttural cry. I realized that her throat had been scarred and she was unable to speak. Her body reeked of a heavy stench, indicating that she had been using the bed as a toilet. But I was too hurried to take care of that. I immediately started to untie her. Clara followed along obediently and didn't make a peep. As I led her outside, the sound of dogs and men suddenly filled the air. It had to be the end. They had found me too soon. Sure enough, the bald man led a group of men into the yard, with a large wolfhound on a leash. Seeing me, he yelled out, "I was wondering why my dogs were running home. Turns out you were hiding here." The men slowly surrounded us. Clara, trembling with fear, tugged at my arm, trying to pull me back inside. I stopped, turned her around, and embraced her tightly, trying to offer her some reassurance. "MMMPH," Clara cried, struggling in my arms. I took a deep breath and yelled out to the mob, "Are you all even human? Hey you, hand over the phone, now. It's too bad you took the bait of being Mr. Wong's friend. It looks like you want to die now. So long as you give us the phone, we might spare you." As he spoke, he unleashed the wolfhound, who growled and advanced towards us. Clara screamed as she hid behind me. As the wolfhound opened its jaws, I could see its razor teeth. If I got bit, I would probably lose a limb. I frantically looked around for something to defend myself, but the dog was already upon us. I was ready to take the brunt of the bite, but nothing happened. Instead, the wolfhound started whimpering and rubbing against Clara. I was shocked, but Clara was still scared of the wolfhound. However, I realized that the wolfhound must recognize her smell, since it was always near her at home. But Clara was still afraid. Seeing that the wolfhound wasn't biting us, Baldy yelled, "Bite them, you idiot!" But the wolfhound was wagging its tail as it sniffed Clara. The bald man angrily stormed over to slap the wolfhound, but the wolfhound turned around and bared its teeth at him. The bald man froze, and the mob slowly started backing away. I took the chance to yell, "How could you do this? How could you torture an innocent woman for money?" The mob then started shouting at each other and concluded that they couldn't let us go. For whatever reason, the wolfhound liked Clara. Luckily, no one could advance due to its presence. Looking towards the dog cage, I noticed that those dogs seemed to recognize Clara. I realized that they probably had great senses of smell, and because she was always in the building, they probably knew Clara's scent. "Clara, hug me tightly, and I'll open the cages." Although she was afraid, she immediately embraced me. I picked up a nearby rock and started to slam it on the cages. Baldy started to yell, "Bro, stop it. Can't we talk about this?" From my prior observations, I had the impression that the dogs were scared of Baldy, but the dogs weren't friendly to him at all. Therefore, I was banking on them hating Baldy. As soon as the cages were opened, the dogs stormed out and ran towards the mob. The mob screamed and backed away, but one of the dogs immediately bit Baldy. Baldy tried to scold them, but he ran as well. The villagers scattered, and some of the dogs turned towards me and sniffed, and decided to follow the rest of the pack. I took this opportunity to carry Clara on my back and escape the compound. As we stepped onto the street, a jeep barreled towards us. The village chief was in the passenger seat and yelled for his men to run over the dogs. Baldy yelled to them to stop, but they kept driving, hitting his dogs. The chief screamed, "I will kill you. How dare you trick me? I'll run you over." How could I run faster than a car? Not to mention that I was carrying Clara on my back. I could hear the jeep speeding up behind me, and I realized that I was doomed. But just then, a TV van pulled up in front of us. I didn't understand why they were here. Then the jeep stopped. Baldy punched the jeep, pulled the chief out, and yelled, "You crushed my dogs." The chief sneered, "The media is here." The TV van slowly stopped, and Daniel jumped out. Behind him, a full camera crew filmed the scene. They pointed the camera at the chief and asked, "We're from X Television, and we're here to investigate the rumors of illegal imprisonment. Is this true?" The chief panicked, and he started to deny. "Those are just rumors. Lies. We're a peaceful village. We're not doing any of that." I yelled, "I have proof. This is my girlfriend. She was held captive in a cell. There are other women in the village too." The camera focused on me, and Baldy yelled, "You shut up. Do you want to get killed?" Daniel blocked me and said, "There's a TV crew here. Dare you take us to your home to search?" Baldy was visibly nervous, and he backed off while saying, "I don't want to deal with you." "Bro, get in." Daniel opened the door to the car. At the same time, the sound of sirens echoed in the air, and several police cars entered the village. Seeing the police, I felt a flood of relief overcome my body. I asked Daniel to call an ambulance for Clara. 10 days later, the media fully exposed Raven's Hollow. They had been training women to sell to illegal organizations and called them meat dogs to avoid detection. The dogs in the village were just there to hide from the police. We learned that the women were lured by the kindness to help fake injured people, and that Clara was lured in to help an elderly woman get home. After I collapsed on the bed in exhaustion, I woke up to television. The doctors had diagnosed Clara with severe trauma and needed at least 1 month of treatment. As I peeled an apple for her, I realized that she had been traumatized. Grabbing her hand, I vowed to protect her for the rest of my life. Daniel told me that he had installed a tracker on my phone so that he could track me. He also learned about the evil secrets of the village through rumor and immediately contacted the media. But once my signal died, Daniel was afraid that something bad had happened, and he rushed to Raven's Hollow with the TV crew. It turns out that there was a jammer in the village, and the chief would activate it if something seemed off. That was how Daniel managed to save us. Of course, it was also all thanks to the dogs. They indirectly saved Clara and I. It's funny, the dogs knew who was good and who was bad, but the humans did evil things. Some people aren't even good enough to be dogs. Worse than animals. They didn't deserve to be human. The end.